other parts of the world pretty dramatically. And the rich elites have had essentially no responsibility towards their own countries. They were oriented towards Europe or the United States. That's where they shipped their capital. That's where they, went for their vacations, sent their children. That was their cultural connections and so on, and not with their own countries or with neighboring countries. Now that's beginning to change. There are moves towards a degree of unification. In fact, just yesterday, a number of countries, including Brazil and Venezuela and Argentina, I think Chile, I'm not sure, but certainly those three, announced the formation of the Banco del Sur and pledged substantial amounts of money for it. Well, that's a Venezuela-initiated project supported by Brazil, a major South American economy, and others, which could lead to an independent source of development funding for South America. There's UNASUR, the Union of South American Republics, which incidentally includes Colombia, has begun to function. Last September, it came out with had quite an important meeting in Bolivia, which is, in my opinion, the most democratic country in the hemisphere, maybe in the world. Could explain if you want. But in Bolivia, the old elites, mostly white, wealthy, privileged elites, are strongly opposed to the democratic developments in Bolivia and want to move towards autonomy or maybe even secession. And last September, they were actually carrying out considerable violence. Several dozen peasant supporters of the president, Evo Morales, were murdered. UNASUR had a meeting in Santiago, Chile. They came out with a strong statement in support of Morales, a unanimous statement, and opposing the violence and the moves towards separatism, defending democracy. And Morales made an interesting statement in response. He said, this is the first time since the European conquests that South America is beginning to act to take its affairs into its own hands without the intervention of foreign powers. He was, of course, referring to the United States. That's important. In fact, it's so important that it wasn't reported in the United States. It's just too threatening to the American, the reigning doctrines, elite doctrines that require U.S. control over Latin America. Well, all of that is quite important. Now, in this case, it happens to join together the several types of countries that you were talking about, Colombia, Chile, Brazil, Argentina, Bolivia, Venezuela. On other issues, they differ, but there's a fair amount of cooperation. Lula in Brazil, for example, has been quite supportive of Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. It differs from a lot of things. And there's a move in that direction. It's beginning to spread finally to Central America. The Salvadoran election was an interesting case. In Mexico, it's, well, as you know better than I do, it's just split down the middle. I mean, the last election, we don't have to talk about, but it was hardly a clear statement of preference for a right-wing government, as you know. And these choices will have to be made by the countries of the region. For Mexico, the question is very simple. It's not simple, but it's straightforward. Does Mexico want to become a subsidiary of the United States, or does it want to join Latin America? NAFTA says you're a subsidiary of the United States. Latin America, meanwhile, is going in a different direction. And Mexico, which is one of the most important countries of Latin America, just has to make a choice on this.
Well, thank you very much for taking our call.
Thank you, Professor Chomsky. Yeah. I think this interview serves as a guide to the youth to pose the questions we as young people should pose. So thank you very much.
Okay, very much enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, Professor Chomsky.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bueno, pues acabamos de tener aquí en entrevista a Noam Chomsky, el gran lingüista de MIT.
Esperamos que las preguntas y las respuestas planteadas pues den pie a más preguntas. Noam Chomsky sin duda sirve como una guía para todos los jóvenes para que nos hagamos las preguntas pertinentes.